Welcome to this week's edition of Cardinal Dash. I'm King Jimison in my little box, joined by Daniel Martinez-Krams in his little box. And Daniel, we may not have liked the result from this past Saturday, but at least we finally have some football to talk about on this week's show. So let's get right into it, Daniel. Stanford lost 35-14 at number 12 Oregon on Saturday. We both predicted better, but we both didn't know that Davis Mills and Connor Weddington would miss the game due to COVID protocols. We always said that this game was going to come down to Davis Mills. Well, it did, but expected. The Cardinals still trailed just 14-7.5, averaged 7.2 yards per play to Oregon's 7.5. If not for some red zone woes, especially 4 missed field goals, maybe this game goes differently. But Daniel, in a 21-point opening week loss, what did you learn from the Oregon game?
So when answering this question, I wanted to go back to the questions I posed both to you last week and in my column for Sports Pac-12. And the first question, as you alluded to, was going to be about how Davis Mills looked in that starter role. We have no idea what that's going to be this year. But we did pick up a lot of information about quarterbacks, and we'll definitely get into that later. But the bigger thing was about the defense, that we were wondering if they were going to be up for the challenge. And overall, it looked like not really. The thing I want to point to, and I'm sure you saw as well, was the 9 for 11 that Oregon was on third down. That's abysmal. They had 8 straight third down conversions at one point. Stanford cannot keep up with that in any game against any team, much less in Oregon. So that was what was most worrying for me, that the defense really looked like it did not have that much improvement from last year, especially when we talk about mobile quarterbacks as well. That was a problem when we look at especially that game against UCLA where DTR totally tore them up. The game against Cal with Chase Garbers, those are two that I just off the top of my head that really stuck out to me. And again, we see Tyler Shugg absolutely running wild on the Cardinal. So those two really stood out to me for all the wrong reasons. For some positives, I think the run game was great. I think we learned that the run game that the coaches were hyping up was the real deal. The offensive linemen that were expected to make a lot of progress from year 1 to year 2 did exactly that. Looked much better in all facets of the run game. Austin Jones is a dude. Nathaniel Pete is a dude. And the offensive line was getting a ton of push. Wish they had gone to the run game more, honestly. And then that, for me, was looking at, is Stanford able to recover its brand? And we saw finally Stanford get a commitment from a 4-star recruit. That happened last week before the game. But we weren't unable to talk about it. So just Aaron Arbitage, 4-star DE, he committed. And then that's a little bit of the recovery of the brand that we were talking about.
I'm not going to be able to add much to this question because you hit it right there. The two key points are offensive line as a pro, defense in general as a con. I mean, Oregon was not electric offensively. 35 points is not exactly, the kind of score we're coming to expect in the SEC or an old Big 12 score, but they were incredibly efficient. They scored touchdowns on 4 of their last 5 drives. You just can't allow that to happen. And like you said, 9 of 11 on third down is the biggest reason why. And why were they able to be so efficient on third down? First of all, they were in third and short because they ran the ball extremely well, 269 yards rushing on 6.7 yards per carry. I mean, frankly, last year, the rushing defense was not the big issue for the Cardinal. It may be this year. We don't know what we're going to get from that front seven. And frankly, Oregon's offensive line may be the best that Stanford faces all season. And so, I think we're going to learn a lot more about the defense this week because as good as Colorado was in week 1, we don't expect them to have the same level of talent as Oregon. But it was very concerning that you could not get stops, that Oregon, after a sluggish start where you get a little momentum, get a couple turnovers, shout out to Levani Demooney, fantastic performance by him. But you can't take advantage of that early. And, of course, we like to talk about offense because that's the fun and flashy stuff. And I do think it's worth talking about how the offense did not help out the defense in the first half. While the defense was playing well in that first half, the offense missed multiple field goals. And Jet Toner, I'm praying for that guy this week. I think he just needs to get his mind right. We know he has the ability to be a very solid kicker, but it was a nightmarish night. And probably worse, Stanford was not good on third down itself and could not convert in the red zone. So that's the negatives, is that I don't think Stanford's defense is going to carry it to anything significant this season. It is going to have to be a case where Stanford outscores people. But the good news is I think they are capable of outscoring people when at full strength. That offensive line was awesome. Did not give up a single sack to maybe the best defensive line in the conference, one of the best defensive lines in the country. And if we continue to see that level of protection for whoever's under center for the Cardinal, particularly if Davis Mills is able to come back this week or in the coming weeks, then I think that's going to bode really well for the passing game. And we saw Stanford's wide receivers; they're capable of making plays even against a good Oregon secondary. And man, I love the Cardinal running game. They ran the ball 197 yards, 6.4 yards per carry. That's very impressive stuff and a huge jump from last season, where I believe the Cardinal averaged under 4 yards per carry, 3.7 for the 2019 season. So if game one is any indication against a strong front seven, we're going to get a little bit more intellectual brutality era football on the offensive side. Don't know about the defensive side just yet.
And you mentioned it with the defense. The one positive we can take away from that game is that they were opportunistic with the turnovers. Getting those two is going to be huge. Maybe it's going to be a lot more break this year than bend, but if Stanford's defense can come up with some timely turnovers, as we saw, with just that mentality of saying we're going to go for the ball, and we saw that Levani Damuni playing it perfectly twice, that may be the biggest positive that we saw out of the defense this game. And let's not forget that Stanford very well could have gone into halftime tied 7-7 if not for an unfortunate penalty call that didn't go Stanford's way. Other than that, Stanford was in the game for a lot of it. And yes, after 4-8 season, Stanford did not want to be having the conversation about, oh, we were in the game, so that's a positive. We didn't want to just put up effort. They're upset about that. They thought that they could go into Oregon and not only compete, but also win. So that's a step back, right, from where they thought they could be. But just seeing the defense have a little bit of juice there, provide a little bit of momentum. And if Stanford's offense was able to capitalize on it, we had 2 turnovers and 0 points off of turnovers. That's unacceptable. So it's really both sides. And the only thing that I would really add to this question about what we learned is one thing I mentioned in my column was how does Stanford athletes choose to use their platform? And Cardinal Black showed up in a big way. They had jackets and T-shirts, and you could clearly see that they had a message that they were following. So super proud of them. Shouts out to Kyla Bryant from women's gymnastics, Maya Dodson from women's basketball, and of course Thomas Booker and the other players on the football team, because I thought that was a really good way to start off the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to feel good about, and obviously the most important thing is what you're talking about there with Cardinal Black and everything Stanford student athletes have done throughout the past few months. I think you should go check it out, and whatever site you can, particularly gostanford.com, see what these young people are investing in. But on the field, I think the product is the score was not in a classic cliche. The game was closer than the score indicated. And I think that cliche is very ambiguous. I hesitate to use it sometimes because I think it can be overused and misunderstood. But I think it's safe to say that Stanford and Oregon did not look like they were playing on different fields on Saturday night. They look like fairly comparable teams where ultimately, by the end of the game, Oregon's depth and the fact that Oregon was coming in with their stars and the fact that Oregon executed much better situationally on third down and in the red zone meant that they got a significant separation on the scoreboard. So I don't think if you're a Stanford fan, you feel badly about this week. And shout out to Jason, one of our Colorado Dash Sports guys in the chat right now, trying to tell us that we should not be taking Colorado lightly. Jason, I completely agree. We're not taking Colorado lightly. But I think it's safe to say this is a game that Stanford absolutely needs to win. Because even if Colorado is as good as they showed against UCLA, this is still one of the easier games on Stanford's schedule, considering it's at home, considering Colorado is probably not going to be contending for a Pac-12 title. And so this is a game you have to get to snap a 5-game losing streak. It's the longest losing streak Stanford has endured since 2006, a 1-11 season. And, they haven't won a game since October 26, 2019. Stanford fans have gone a calendar year without a win. And listen, there hasn't been much else to feel good about too, so that really hurts. And Daniel, a lot of it we've talked about the lessons learned from week one. Of course, those lessons are all tempered with the fact that Davis Mills was not on the field, and it was really who you're building your offense around this season.